All right, so we had someone ask recently about some heavy duty diesel stuff, and I thought, what's a good point to make and also a topic to cover? So we're going to talk about workmanship makes all stars. Workmanship makes careers, makes money. So in the beginning, you're not going to be fast, but don't worry about fast. I started at Sacramento Truck Center as a utility technician, and I'm not proud of it, but 29 hours to do a clutch on a semi. I got that down to about 5, 4. Between there, I can do a deep dish clutch, and that's moving. And maybe that was in my prime, but at the same time, each time you should be attempting to shave off time, not quality, never quality. So what we have here is something that happened to a customer who was driving down the road in a Duramax. He had $16,000 of work done. I may have had this covered in another video, but essentially, I'm just going to give a few minutes on workmanship alone. So this injector sits, let's call this the injector, sitting in the injector bore. And let's say that this is holding it down, right? Well, that means that both sides of this have got to be the right cant, and they can't be pushing that injector one way or the other, right? It has to be just dead center. And remember, this nozzle pokes through the bore that much into the cylinder. Well, maybe not that much, but you understand the point. This is exposed to the cylinder. So if this little bore that the injector nozzle seats into isn't a clean angle, then you're going to have this pitch right here. That means that right underneath here, there's a washer. It's made of copper. That washer is sealing inside of the bore, right? It can't do that if it's not concentric or it's not round and it doesn't apply crushing pressure to that copper washer evenly. So this guy had all this work done. There is a spacer on a Duramax that goes right here that sits on top of the head. It's made to a certain height. I took a machine screw and machine one down to the same exact height as the other buttons that were underneath there, and I replaced it. O-rings, new O-rings on the injector, cleaned everything up, put it back, ran it, and it was fine. But when it pulled in, it sounded like like an air compressor discharge line. So that's a real keen noise. Not many things do that. When an engine's making that like it's generating like a compressor discharging, then generally it's from the injector bore. And this is usually because of some type of workmanship if you're looking at a truck that's had work done. So another thing about injectors, the reason that crush washer matters so much is it because, like I said, when that nipple or that tip of the nozzle is exposed into the cylinder, it's underneath the head, exposed. It has a certain amount of height. I can't even show you with this gauge, but maybe you can see there's a little step that's only worth a couple of thousandths of metal removed from one side of that round pole. So this rests on the body of the injector on, say, a C15, and this rests on the body of the spring body. So if it's sitting on there and you can adjust the height, all right, for an injection, or not on the spring body, the injector valve body. And so they have to be down at a certain height to be able to set the injector height to make sure that right when that injector lobe comes over, that it's being atomized at just the right time. And that's all the pass or fail you get. I might redo some of these because I know you know what I'm saying, but I really have points I'm trying to make rather than be entirely too specific. So workmanship. So this guy, I charged him to be in the front of the line, a stack of cash, because I had a bunch of customers waiting, and that's what you do. If you have everybody who wants to make you drop what you do, here's a little tip for pricing. Sorry, you add another $50 to $60 onto each hour of labor, and you call it a fast bay or quick bay rate. That means, yes, you can get to the front of the line, but it's not fair to any of my other customers to take preference over you. The mechanic's worst nightmare is all of his friends wanting the work that the shop's supposed to be doing for $1 done for them for beer money. Stop doing that, guys. So if a stack of cash and a beer, is one thing, but to expect someone to do something because you're their friend, that's called a misuse of a relationship, a usurpation of a friend, and use of a person. And a lot of mechanics get real fed up, and I'll just speak for them on their behalf. So, workmanship, people will talk about you everywhere you go. If you show up with the right tools, you adjust everything just right, and when you're done, it runs like clockwork, then you'll be the guy. I could go into an example. I'm not going to, but there's been many times where an injector was set wrong, and it was overfueling or underfueling, and you saw it on the cylinder balance. But it was set wrong. So you don't get very many thousands here as far as pass or fail to make sure that injector is going to be injecting at the precise time. And like on some injectors, that's based on the actual injector lobe on the cam. When we're talking about big diesels and stuff, we got rockers that are acting on it, and then the solenoid that's being engaged. So that acting on the rocker arm and the plunger, intensifier piston, all the inner workings of the injector has to happen at just the precise time to meter fuel at just the precise time. Now, if I change the height of that, even if it does it at the precise time, the spray pattern is not conical and it doesn't create peak combustion. So you have improper combustion, which is not an engine that doesn't run, but it doesn't run well. So these things about workmanship, like I said, if you leave the job site and the thing runs better, I've had people say, that engine's never run that well. And all I did was the overhead, but it had never been ran. So these things are noticeable, especially to neglected engines, but only when they're done very precisely. Later on, when we have engines and I have a school built and I've been able to do some things, I'll be able to give all the information free out on there online about, we'll go over how to run overheads on different types of engines and how you understand clearly what the acquired feel is. And there's some tips to being able to make sure your feeler gauge is just perfect with the drag. Oil, temperature, if you're setting an overhead in the absolute cold, you need to squeeze all the oil out of the button before you run the overhead or adjust any kind of oil or hydraulically. So when they use hydraulic in those buttons, it's to account for the slop in the button and to make sure that when you're setting it, that you're setting it here, and it accounts for that hydraulic, like a lifter, the hydraulic pressure inside of that button. That's why if it's in the cold, it's like honey, it won't come out of that button. You have to squeeze it all the way out. Most of the times when you read the beginning of like overhead sets and even injector sets, you're going to read, don't do it in this type of temperature. And to all those people outside who are doing engine work outside where you have heads off or oil pans off or even valve covers off, that's not good workmanship. You can say what you want, and I know people have to do what they have to do, but you're robbing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of miles from the engine based on the fact that you built it outside. All that stuff will go through main bearings. It's all inside of the crankcase. Crankcase is supposed to be hermetically sealed. All right, you might get some carbon in there, but no introduction of debris that would degrade the cylinder condition. So I have seen engines, big semis. I was tasked with in-frame overhaul. One of them, there was an SDP CAT, one of the newer after treatment engines, and which is basically a 6NZ with a whole lot of crap strapped to the side of it to make it emissions compliant. Well, one of the issues with it, compliancy was what's called a clean gas induction, or basically post-exhaust being rerouted, post-filtration air being rerouted back into the engine. So what you had is it was on the bottom, and it was a stainless steel flex pipe that would break, and what it would do is it would suck in dirt and it would wash out the cylinder. Well, I didn't know until then that all it took was a tablespoon of dirt to completely wash out and glaze every one of the cylinders in a big old 12.7 liter or beyond big old diesel engine. So be very mindful. As a matter of fact, even when you're talking about turbos, ingesting debris, workmanship, if you guys got if you're outside doing this and you got dust devils and all these other things that are going on, that's way worse than anything you're ever going to ingest in that engine, because the filtration doesn't allow for any debris to get sucked in. If you talk about condemning turbos on big semis, and I've been to turbo failure analysis school through Detroit, they have, what you do is you take the compressor side off, and on that little divot on the top of the turbo where the nut goes, you take a Q-tip, and if there's any dirt, no warranty. There's a big reason for that, because that will glaze an engine, find dirt so much faster than anything else. One last tip, and then I'll shut up. If you're blowing out your air filters with a blowgun, you're blowing filter holes into those filter elements that are actually bigger than they're ever made to be. So you're introducing a pathway for debris that was never rated to go inside of your engine. If you're going to tamp them, I understand, no one wants to buy a new filter. If you live in places with, potato fields and these other, you need to be checking them 2 to 3 times more than your intervals. Because how many people get pulled down for low power because it takes air to make air, right? And then you're scavenging oil, and all of a sudden they're telling you need an in frame because you're burning oil. You're burning it from the crankcase because it's going to come from somewhere. The turbo will pull it through the discharge line or the actual drain line of the turbo. It doesn't care as long as it has air, and it's called scavenging. So mind your filters, mind your clean work areas, and use your highest grade of workmanship and knowledge of how to do the job, and stop tearing down main bearings and doing that shit outside. That's horrible. Okay, thank you.